Happy New Year! I'm Rory, and welcome to Crime, Wine, and Dine, where I do my best to pair food and drink with crime. Hello, my crime, wine, and diners. Mwah! You look good. Happy New Year. We've got ourselves another piece of shit.
I've probably done anything a man would want to do with a woman. Obviously, I must be sick somehow. Normal people don't do what I did.
Richard Francis Cottingham is an American serial killer from the total depths of hell. We don't talk much about him, perhaps because of the level of the disturbingness of his crimes. He was named the Torso Killer, not to be mistaken with the Cleveland guy. No, not that guy. And he was named Times Square Killer. And he was named the Butcher of Times Square. Huh. He was so prolific and brutal in his crimes, we gave the asshole 3 names. This story is not for the faint of heart. So here's your trigger and content warning. Here we go. Cottingham was born on November 25th, 1946, in the Bronx, New York City. He was the first of 3 children. He was a loner in middle school, didn't have many friends. That's like me. I still don't have any friends. I don't know. None of this is a sign of bad times to come. If that was the case, then every theater and or band kid would be a serial killer. He did better in high school. Once they moved in 1958 to Rivervale, New Jersey. Yeah, things started looking up. In 1964, he graduated from Pascack Valley High School in New Jersey. High school was better for him. He just wasn't a joiner, like one of his school peers said. Never had a girlfriend in high school, but he was in track and field and cross country. He certainly talked locker nonsense to the boys and focused a lot on the breastises of his fellow female classmates. I know what you're thinking. Rory, that is probably the crux of the beginning of many issues. But that just sounds like some teenage boy bliggity-bloop. Look, I'm beyond bored with his upbringing. Just a real snooze fest. Nothing! He's an average guy with an average family living an average life. Classic Catholic, kind and quiet Caucasian, middle-class upbringing. Being an outcast isn't enough to equal the torture that befell his victims and the first responders. So snooze to his Leave It to Beaver life. You know what? I can't think of a better snack for this moment than a delicious, simple, but average afternoon American meal. Grilled cheese sandwich. Follow me. You see, I've said all of this because once you hear about these murders, your brain is going to want to conclude something happened to him in his past. So remember this decent, average, simple moment. Ain't nothing there. Sometimes I think the sickest people on this earth are just born that way. And like everything in life, just takes a little time for them to show it. Because he will make up for all of this lost time in his future. So let's begin there. His future. Richard Cottingham worked for his father at the Metropolitan Life from 1964 to 1966 as a computer operator. Fabulous, dedicated worker, loyal. All this while taking computer courses. In October 1966, he got a new gig, working as a computer operator at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association in New York City's Midtown. Life was good. Meanwhile, October 1967, New Jersey. Two 12-year-old girls spotted a mannequin in a car. When they approached the vehicle, it wasn't a mannequin. It was Nancy Shiava Vogel, a 29-year-old married mother of two. She was strangled, nude, bruised, and her wrists were bound with a thin nylon cord. Her clothes were neatly folded under her body in her car. The coroner said she died from asphyxiation, but also noted she fought for her life. Her husband had last seen her 3 days earlier, when she left home to have a me day of shopping and bingo with friends at the local church. She never made it to the church. The police were stumped. No clues, no tips. Back at Blue Cross Blue Shield, Richard's co-workers retell how off-putting some of his behaviors and conversations were slowly becoming. That locker talk was getting a little extra. He bragged a lot about prostitutes and how he could lure them out of Manhattan to New Jersey. He used wads of cash that he earned from gambling frequently to lure them. He would draw out the layout of hotels and their exits and their entrances. Mostly his co-workers remembered him being fidgety. For 8 hours, he wouldn't stop moving and shaking from head to toe. Alcohol would soothe his nerves. This would lead to chronic alcohol abuse, which would get him a DUI. My crime, wine, and diners. That's a lot. The absurdity of the situation obviously led his co-workers to think he was telling stories, right? But I think we have a rich base for our cauldron of chaos stew. So, sprinkle in that DUI, all right? On October 3rd, 1969, he was charged and convicted of drunk driving in New York City and sentenced to 10 days in jail and a $50 fine. But he cleaned up his act. On May 3rd, 1970, Cottingham finds the love of his life and marries her, Janet. They moved to Little Ferry, New Jersey. Oh, I didn't want to leave this one little detail out, so Janet had some larger than usual, bazungas. Yeah, guess it was sort of a preference from high school that, it just carried on. Perhaps that's gonna be our bouillon cube for signature taste. On August 21st, 1972, Cottingham was charged and convicted of shoplifting at Stern's department store in Paramus, New Jersey, and was sentenced to pay a $50 fine. Okay, that's odd. Yeah, that's strange. It's bizarre. Okay, life was good, so this doesn't make sense. This doesn't fit. I didn't see this coming. I mean, he has a great job that pays well. We're gonna call this a little smudge on his record. Okay, a little blip in time, as it doesn't seem to fit with his MO. Moving forward. 1973, they're preggers! But despite all of this great news, Richard's happiness seemed to be on the decline. And on September 4th, 1973, sprinkle in that he was arrested for robbery. Assault and Whew. Now, the charges were dropped. Richard made it clear to his wife that the police were in error. It was a misunderstanding, right? Then, Blair was born, October 15th, 1973. A few months later, Richard, well, what do you know? Sprinkle in some he's been charged with unlawful imprisonment and robbery? That spice was actually no good, because the charges were dropped again. 1975, they moved to Lodi, New Jersey. Scott was born in March. 1976, Jenny was born. And enter Barbara Lucas, the woman he began having an affair with. The pepper. The cheese topping to our stew, or perhaps the straw that broke the camel's back. However you look at it, soup. Done. Here we go. December 1977, 26-year-old Marianne Carr, a radiologist, went missing. She was found in a parking lot December 16th between a curb and a chain-link fence, brutally beaten near a Quality Inn motel. The corpse had ligature marks on the wrist, neck, and ankles from the handcuffs. She was bruised all over, her arms, shoulders, thighs, face, and chest, which also had deep, torturous bite marks. Her shoes, coat, and purse were missing, and a chunk of her hair was cut. Residue from the tape was detected on her mouth. September 1978, Karen Schilt was having a conversation with a man called John Schaefer. He was regaling her with stories of his hardships in life. Eventually, John asked if she was a working girl. She said no. He pursued still, despite her denials. Suddenly, the room began to spin for her. She decided to leave the bar and John and just head home. John caught up with her in his car and offered her a ride. She was so drugged, she agreed without question and passed out immediately, only to wake at the New Jersey Turnpike with Richard forcing Tuinal down her throat. A frequent date-rape drug at the time. 9 a.m., policeman Raymond Alger found her body stuffed into a drainage ditch behind a car at the Ledgeview Terrace complex. She was mostly naked with her clothes half on. Her chest was ferociously bitten and burned with a cigarette. Her coat, scarf, and purse were missing. Police performed CPR on Karen and saved her life. Yeah! Karen! Never thought I'd say that this year. Yeah, Karen! You are a survivor. Tell him what he looked like. Give him the dates. Get this asswipe Cotton jailed. Nah. Karen couldn't remember shit. The drugs and alcohol seemed to distort any recall she may have had. Damn it. October 10th, 1978. Richard, who, let's just go ahead and start calling him Dick at this point. Short for Richard, whose name is being trashed by this monster. To all the kind-hearted Richards out there, we see you. Dick met Suzanne Geiger. She was a prostitute who worked in Times Square. Dick enticed her with a wad of cash from his gambling money. He told these women stories as a victim down on his luck to entice them into his poor, wounded hand. He took her to a pub, calling himself Jim, drugged her drink, and brought her back to his room. She woke the next day in the hotel room bleeding from every orifice. Her earrings had been ripped from her ears. She was covered in lashes and bruises, and her purse was taken. She called the police, rambling and incoherent from the drugs. No clues. Case dries up. November 1979. Carl Wilson booked a room at the Travel Inn Hotel in New York. It was located 2 blocks from Times Square. Carl was described by staff as tall, 30s, sandy, blonde hair. He placed a Do Not Disturb sign on the room, 417. It was Dick. On December 2nd, 1979, firemen in New York responded to an alarm at the Travel Inn. Dick had picked up 2 prostitutes, Dita Gudarzi, an immigrant aged 22, and a teenage Jane Doe. He took them to his hotel room. At checkout time, an employee found 2 women in room 417. Both had been tortured. Their torsos were slashed. Cuts around their chests were made. These wounds, however, were superficial. He was teasing them with their foreseeable torture and death. Fear. Torturous fear. He soon mutilated their corpses and severed their heads and hands. Dick fled the scene with the severed heads and hands, which were never recovered, and sprinkled accelerant on their torsos and set them on fire. He neatly folded their clothes and placed them in the bathtub. This crime scene was so horrific for one of the firefighters he underwent trauma counseling, describing the scene as the worst thing he had encountered in his entire career. This made the police say, perhaps, just perhaps, this is all the work of one man, a serial killer. You know, the bite marks, the prostitutes and all. The media then names the asshole twice. The Times Square Ripper and the Torso Killer. Police ramped up efforts and posted pics of the victim's clothing, producing a lead to Dita Gudarzi. Later, Dick said he mutilated them to prevent identification.
How did you actually get to cut off their heads and hands?
Very easy, with a hacksaw. That was done only to prevent identification. It was an ego trip.
But I'm having a hard time believing that as the only and main reason. Police pulled him over at 3 a.m. close to the scene of the crime and asked what he was doing. Even though they saw the bag next to him, they believed his story, and they never asked him for ID or went any further with questioning where or what he was doing at 3 a.m. I could make people believe what they wanted to believe. It's godlike almost. On May 5th, 1980, Marianne Sancanelli was cleaning room 132 in a Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. She began vacuuming despite a foul smell in the room, and around one of the beds, the device slammed up against something. Everyone, including the police, were surprised to find the naked and brutally bound body of 19-year-old Valerie Ann Street. The victim's hands were so tightly handcuffed, they exposed her raw flesh behind her back. She was covered in bite marks and parts of her chest were chewed off. She was beaten across the shins. There was tape residue on her mouth and ligature markings on her neck. Street had died of asphyxiation. The pathologist determined she was tortured over a 24-hour period. May 12th, 1980, after a serial killer cooling off period, Dick dropped off the body of waitress Pamela Weisenfeld in a parking lot in Teaneck, New Jersey. She'd been beaten while drugged, and of course her chest had been viciously bitten. On May 15th, 1980, firefighters were called to the historic Seville Hotel and found the corpse of a young woman. She was strangled and her throat was cut. Her chest was cut off completely and neatly arranged on the headboard.
Can you tell me why you cut off the breasts of one victim?
To do something different. I mean, she was already dead. I mean, it wasn't something that she was alive. And I wanted to create a sensationalism.
But I mean, you still have to have the balls to do this. I mean...
It's not hard. It's just a body. I mean, it's not a living person no more.
Her hands were left behind. And so because she had multiple run-ins with the law over the years, when her fingerprints were submitted, they actually came back as a match. Jean Rayner, a prostitute on weekends who was just trying to make a large sum of money to get custody of her son back. April 1980, Janet filed for divorce, stating extreme cruelty from Dick, lack of intimacy since 1976, and leaving the family financially neglected. After his wife Janet initiated divorce proceedings on the grounds of abandonment, non-support, and mental cruelty, he'd been spending nights in the basement of their home in Lodi, New Jersey. For a large chunk of their marriage, he went on a lot of vacations, returned home at 4 a.m., went to Plato's Retreat in Manhattan, and was a regular patron of gay bars and bathhouses. And this begs the question, were there male or transgendered victims? And no one took note. On May 22, 1980, Leslie Ann Odell was a prostitute in Times Square. A man named Tommy approached her, and he gave the same old woe-is-me shtick to build trust. He offered to help her escape prostitution and would take her to a bus stop in Jersey. She said yes. He made her a deal, $100 for her services first. He then brought her to the Quality Inn Hotel, the same one Valerie Ann Street was killed in. Dick offered to give her a massage. She got on her stomach and said, quote, he wanted to be my friend. He drew a knife and put it to her throat as he snapped a pair of handcuffs on her wrists. He began torturing her, nearly biting off parts of her chest. He burned all of her private parts, beat her, slashed her with his knife. He would take breathers and wash her face with a damp cloth, but she saw a gun that he brought with him. She grabbed it and fired. Nothing. It was a replica, so he tortured her even more. Odell's muffled cries of pain became so loud that the motel staff, already spooked by the murder 18 days earlier, called the police and then rushed to the room demanding that Dick open the door. Leslie opened the door several minutes later, just a crack. He told her to tell the police she was okay, and she did, but her eyes spoke otherwise. That's my girl. She managed to get the message out to them. Dick tried to escape with his bag of torture devices, but didn't get far. Cottingham was apprehended by arriving police officers in the hallway. When arrested, he had handcuffs, a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a switchblade, replica pistols, and a stockpile of prescription pills. He was read his Miranda rights and stated that what happened was consensual. Yeah, police didn't buy it. Then he said, well, I have a problem with women, and blamed it all on his wife divorcing him. He then lawyered up. These are the charges listed in Dick's New Jersey indictment. After his arrest, police found a few personal effects, traced 2 of the victims in his basement trophy room and in the trunk of his car, including the necklace from Jean Ann that was taken in a police pick when she was arrested for prostitution before her death. In a series of trials in New Jersey and New York, in 1981 to 1984, Dick pleaded not guilty and took the stand, thinking he'd be able to win the jury over with his oh-so-cunning ways. Dick had a working knowledge of forensics, and in the 13-year period during which he's known to have committed at least 11 murders, only 1 fingerprint belonging to him was recovered from the ratchet mechanism of handcuffs left behind on one of his victims. He said the cops planted the print. A case based on signature pattern was built against Dick, along with the testimony of the 3 surviving victims. He was first found guilty of murdering Valerie Street, drawing a sentence of 173 to 197 years in prison. In 2 following trials, he was found guilty of 4 second-degree murders. In 2010, Dick pleaded guilty of the 1967 murder of Nancy Vogel. He confessed under immunity to the murders of the New Jersey schoolgirls Jackie Harp, Irene Blaze, and Denise Falaska in 1968 to 1969. In 2021, he confessed and pleaded guilty in the double abduction and murders of Lorraine Marie Kelly, 16, and Marianne Pryor, 17. He claims to have committed between 85 and 100 murders.
Over 85, under 100. I was doing this for years. Hardly a week or 2 went by without something happening.
So you're saying you were killing a victim every week?
Every couple of weeks on average.
For how many years?
I can't tell you that, but well over 10.
Would you have continued to kill if you hadn't been arrested by the police?
Definitely. Definitely.
Cottingham is incarcerated in New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, New Jersey. He has made interesting attempts to commit suicide multiple times without success. This city is tough. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And we cleaned up Times Square. Couldn't be more Disney. And that, my guys, my gals, and non-binary pals, calls for a drink. I can think of nothing better in this moment to honor this city, its resilience, and its capture of such a poop fart than a drink. Not just any drink, but a drink that was made in 1875 at the Manhattan Club. A Manhattan. Skull. Delicious. Look, the cliches are spot on, folks. New York will chew you up and spit you out. But on the way, you get choices. Where was their chance to make those choices? He took that from them. This story's any moment makes me furious. A man like this guy, try as we may, likely cannot be rehabilitated. Mentally, he's absolutely disturbed. He received 125 years. But this guy robbed someone once for $500 at 17 years old and got 1,000 plus years. That's beyond me. That is a broken system. The system is broken. Oh, you think otherwise because in the robbery case, his adult Caucasian counterpart that planned the whole thing received 10 to 13. This guy didn't do anything greater or worse, but fall into the extreme bias of a piece of shit judge. The The working women of Times Square that Dick was using, they went to jail. They had the records and rap sheets. The shopkeepers and the porn theaters, they got the fines. None of these folks could thrive or exist without the dicks of this world paying for it, perpetuating the cycle. America, you messy. Thank you for joining me on Crime, Wine, and Dine. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. Until next time.